Welcome along everybody. Today I'm going to be showing you how I made this card called The Morning After the Night Before. As you can see, it's just a print of the card because the original is with Wendy. So to make this card, I used the Making a Splash stamp set. I used the 2 ducks out of that and the pool here for the water. It doesn't really matter which one of those you decide to use. I used the textures set, the small grass stamp out of the texture set here. I used the Breezy Day clear stamp collection, the balloons out of this one. The Way the Wind Blows stamp set, and I used the line of flags out of this one. Waving Wildflowers, I used the small waving grass out of this set, and the idea really, that one of the reasons I wanted to show you this card was because I've been asked a few times on the Facebook page about colouring images. So this on this video I'm going to show you 3 different ways that I do it, excuse me, which, you know, obviously, I'm sure some of you do this already, but it will just give you a guide to some of the techniques I use. So what we're going to do to start off with, sorry, I'm just going to put that there so I can see the colours. What I'm going to do to start off with, I've got a 7x7 card here, and I've masked off the bottom and a little bit of the top. You probably know when you see my cards, I like to do this because it gives a nice frame to your finished project. So I've mounted these 2 ducks onto one stamp block, and I'm going to use Versafine Clair Morning Mist. Now it's important, if you're going to do these techniques, to use a permanent ink, because we're going to colour over the top of it, and if you use one of the other types of inks like Versacolor, it could move that ink around, whereas this will stay put. So what I do, I'm going to ink these images. I'm going to give them a really good ink in with this Morning Mist with the grey until I think I've got them well covered like that. And then I'm going to use a little bit of scrap paper. I'm going to just place that image onto this paper and just gently push like that to get some of this ink off, because we don't want it that dark. And then I'm going to place it on my project, so I'm going to have these about here, and then I'm going to press quite hard, because what we should be left is a paler grey image, and obviously we want the guide of where we're going to colour. So I should think that would be okay. There, you see? Okay. So now we've got those, we need to give them just a little bit of time to dry. So what I'm going to do now is stamp the images that we want attached to their feet. And I'm going to do this in exactly the same way. So I'm going to bring back my bit of scrap paper. I'm going to take my Versafine Clair Morning Mist, and I'm going to ink up the bunting. And then I'm going to do exactly the same, just lay it off there gently. And then we want the smaller end of the flag sort of tied to his feet, going up through the middle like that. And then press hard so you get a nice clear image to colour in like that. And then I'm going to do exactly the same with the balloon stamp. Give it a good ink. And then gently lay off that ink, and then we're going to have that attached to his ankle here. We don't want it to sort of go over the wing, so just make sure that you've angled it so it comes out at an angle where it's not brushing the wing, like that. Okay, so that's our main images stamped now, and we want to give them a little bit of time to dry. So what I'm going to do now is just put in a bit of the background. Now, because I've called this Morning After the Night Before, I'm going to put a little bit of sunrise, the effect of sunrise in the background. So I'm just going to put this about just a tiny little bit up over the duck's feet, like that. And then I'm going to take some Versacolor. This one's marigold, but you know, you can use any sort of yellow colour, yellow or orange, whatever inks you've got. Just going to run it off. I always try and do this. I'm just going to make sure that is in the right place. That's it. And then I'm just going to go up. And you've seen this technique. You've seen Wendy, Lainey and Catriona do these techniques. So you just run that up to give the idea of the sun rising in the background. It'll become more obvious, obviously, when I put the foreground in. But so we're just running that up through the middle. Don't worry if you get a little bit on the figures you've already stamped, because we're going to go over them anyway, aren't we, in pen or in ink in a minute. Okay, so I think that's probably a little bit more this side. And then I'm going to do exactly the same with the Versacolor orange. Now this is quite a strong orange, so I'll make sure this time I do rub quite a lot off on the scrap and then move it up. See what I mean? It's quite a juicy pad, this, so just move it up into the yellow like that. And then I'm going to take a clean part of my dry baby wipe and just blend that in. If you prefer to use blending brushes, that's fine. Just be careful when you, I mean, I say it doesn't matter if you get a little bit of colour on the figures, but try not to obscure them, because you'll have trouble painting over them later then. Now, you can always add a little bit more to this at the end. Really, we want to get the sort of idea of our background in first before we, you know, we can always tweak it a little bit later. So the other thing I'm going to do is add a little bit of blue for the sky, and I'm going to use royal blue Versacolour for this, which is the colour I nearly always use for sky. And again, I'm going to rub a little bit off onto my scrap paper, and then just in these little sort of swirling motions, which you see creates its own cloud formation. If you want to take more time over this, that you know that Wendy has made some lovely cloud stamps, and or if you don't want the sky blue, you can obviously do it any colour you want to. But as I wanted this to be quite a quick card to do, this technique works quite well. And then we just go in the gap there, and then I like to try and make it a little bit darker where I put the tape, because otherwise you're just left with white card. And sometimes, although I usually put a black line, you want that sort of more defined. So I think that's enough for now. Again, we can always look here when it's finished if we need to put any more in. Okay, now what I'm going to do is put the two pools in. So I'm using this stamp of the pool set. And again, because I'm going to be colouring grass over this, I'm going to use the Versafine Clair again, the permanent ink, because I don't want to obscure the water. So this time I'm going to ink up my stamp, and I'm not going to lay it off. I want the full colour, because this is going to be the colour, and I'm going to put one in front of this duck like that, and then I'm going to do, sorry, put that back there, and then I'm going to do exactly the same on the other side. Now I'm using the same stamp for quickness, but there are two stamps of water pools in there, so you can use different ones if you want it to look slightly different. Okay, just put that out the way. And then I'm going to put in the foreground. Now, obviously, we need a little bit of time for this to dry, so I'm going to work up in the background, keep away from that just for a minute while it has time to dry off. And I'm going to start with the Versacraft Pine. Those of you that watch my videos and comment on my things know that this is one of my favourite greens. Versacraft is more opaque than Versacolor, and it's more permanent, but it blends just like Versacolor, so it's lovely to use. Okay, so I'm just running that along where the duck's feet are, and what I really want to do is where I've got that horizon line, I just want to eventually obscure that. Really, I don't particularly want a harsh line there. You know, when we start putting the grass texture stamps in, you won't notice it so much anyway. But can you see what I mean? It just blurs that sort of harsher line, but you still know where the background and the foreground begin and end. Okay, so I'm going to bring that around the feet and then bring it right down to the front. And then really, you know, it doesn't matter what you do here because you can blend it out. You can have darker light bits. That's what grass would look like anyway. And I say we're going to put some texture stamps over the top anyway. So what the aim is at the moment, just to cover that, so we can get an idea of our picture taking shape. And I'm just going to go in again here. And a bit more probably up into the background like that. So as you can see, I've already obscured some of that orange and yellow, so I probably will go back in a minute and make that a little bit higher. But you know, the crafting isn't a pure science, so you know, what we aim to do is show you techniques, and I'm sure you've all got your own ways of doing things, and also how you want your picture to look will be maybe slightly different to the way I want my finished picture to look. Okay, so I think that's okay for now. Now what I'm going to do is take a darker green, which is Versacolor, which is the evergreen, and I'm going to start, you can see the difference in colour then. I'm just going to start going around the edge of these pool areas where I've done the pools, and I'm going to put a little bit under the duck's feet there. We will be highlighting that a bit more in a minute. And then here, because obviously where the water is, it would be wetter. So, you know, that would look a little bit darker. And then up under his feet. Like that. Okay, and then I'm going to take a little bit of scrap paper. I've just cut a line. And we're going to put in a few lines with the evergreen like that. Can you see? And just actually that's a bit straight, so I'm just going to angle it a bit more just to give some contours, or the idea of contours. You see in the grass there. Just have that going down that way. And this also helps because it gives you a guide when you come to stamp your grass. If you're a little bit nervous or you're new to stamping, this helps because you know you can stamp it using this piece of paper around that sort of line. Okay, and then I'm just going to put a little line going underneath his foot there, and the same on this side because he's got both feet are more visible here. I'm going to go right along. And then because that's a little bit straight, I'm just going to bring that down at an angle. Like that. Okay. Probably just add another little line in here, going the angle going the other way. Right, I think that will do for now. So I'm just going to go back up while I give that the pool a little bit longer to dry. I'm just going to go back up into the background now with my sunset colours to go over where I've done the green again. Just along there, and so just so it's more visible. And I say, you know, the reason I called this card the morning after the night before is obvious, really. You know, they've been to a party. They probably had I don't know what dunks drink. The water might have been spiked. So, you know, they've come back with the balloons and the bunting. So it's a humorous card, really. But if you don't want to do it, or you want to attach something else to them, you obviously adjust your card to what you want people to see in it, really. Okay, I think that's probably enough. That's high enough now for us to see. I'm just going to go to the back. It's sometimes when you pre-stamp figures, it's easy to leave out the tiny bits like under their wings, the bits behind them. But now is the time to make sure that you haven't left any gaps, because once we painted it, we don't really want to go back in and mess about with it then. Okay, now the only other thing I'm going to do is take my evergreen Versacolor. Again, lay it off a little bit, and then I'm just going to go over where the pools are because they're quite stark and blue, and I just want to tone that down a tiny bit. Like that. Okay. So now I think before we start putting all our grasses in, we're now going to colour in. So the first technique I'm going to use is on the birds. And to do the birds, I'll be using these Stabilo chalk pencils, which are lovely to use. They're sort of blendable. The only thing I would say, if you're going to use these on a card, when you finish the card, just if you've got some cheap hairspray, just give it a shake and then just give it a quick spray across, and that will keep the little fragments of chalk actually on your card rather than flaking. I mean, I haven't really had a problem with it, to be honest, but if you're going to send it through the post or something, then that will make sure it stays in place. So what I'm going to do is start off with the body of this bird. Now, what I do is lay down the colour I want, which in this case is brown. And then I'm just going to take a clean part of my baby wipe and just gently blend that in. Like that. And then just along the wing there. And then we're going to put some the same colour brown. Now, the lovely thing about these pencils is, you know, you've got that lovely point. So you can, you know, put it right where you want it. It's not so easy to blend it in with a baby wipe, so I think Lainey uses cotton buds sometimes, and I do occasionally if you've got a very small area, and you can buy those very fine tipped cotton buds now, which are ideal for this. But because this doesn't really matter, I mean, we're going to blend colours into each other, so we don't have to be too precise. I'm not going to bother with these ducks, or I think they're ducks. I don't know what variety. In fact, I copied these colours from Crafty Cat because she did a lovely card with these colours on. She's very good at it. I don't know if you've ever seen any of her cards with birds on. They're amazing. And I quite often pinch her colour ideas. She doesn't mind, I've asked her. And that's the lovely thing about, well, not just a design group, but the whole Facebook page, you know, that we all share ideas, we all help each other out. And I know there's been some comments, especially recently, about new people coming on being intimidated because, you know, some of the cards are, well, I'd say all the cards on there are beautiful, but people say, oh, you know, I've only just started. I don't want to post my card because I don't think it's good enough. Well, I don't really believe in that. I think, you know, crafting should be fun first and foremost. And I think when you post your things on there, that honestly, it's just the nicest, most encouraging group, and it gives you confidence and you learn things. You know, you can learn different techniques. I've learned a lot being on there, and my crafting journey started out with a few die cuts. I know I've said this to you before, but this is really for the benefit of people who haven't heard this before. I started off with a few die cuts, a set of DL cards, and I just punched out these die cuts and stuck them in a line on these cards, and honestly I thought they were the greatest thing since sliced bread, and the people I gave them to thought that as well. So our journeys all have to start somewhere, and the most important thing is that you relax when you're doing it. All the troubles that life throws at us every day sort of slip away a little bit. So please do post your work, don't feel intimidated. And I say it's the nicest group on the internet, in my opinion. Okay, so you can see I'm adding a little bit of the green into the ducks, and it blends in so beautifully. You just blend that there, and then I'm going to add the green to the head as well. This is a little bit smaller, and I don't really want to lose the shape of the head. So what I'm going to do is go in between the eyes on both of them. Just be careful to keep that shape because, you know, that is what distinguishes these birds. And then if you just gently rub that then the eyes will still stand out. Can you see? And then, so I was using this green to do it, which is sort of like a moss green. But I'm going to add now a little bit of this teal colour, because sometimes these birds do look a bit oil on water. So can you see, I'm just stroking a little bit of the chalk of the pencil in. And then I'm just going to blend that in with my baby wipe into the green and brown. And then you get that lovely, just that lovely hint of colour there, like that. And I'm going to do the same on the head, like that. Now, I hope you can see that, because obviously these aren't the biggest stamps. So I hope you can see how that colour's coming on. In fact, I might add a little bit more, just for the camera, so you can pick up the technique. So I'm adding that sort of tealy blue over the brown and green that I've already stamped, and then I'm just going to blend down into it like that. And then, because obviously when you're blending like that, because it's chalk, you can rub off the base colour. So I'm just gonna, which I've done a little bit here, so I'm just going to add a little bit more of the base colour back. And then on the tips of the wings, like that. And then being careful not to go too near the blue, which I've already done. I'm just going to blend that down, and on this one. Right, and then I'm going to use a nice bright yellow for the beak or the bill, like that, and this one. And then I'm going to do the same for the feet down here. Yellow or orange. It's nice to have a bright contrast, because you can see the difference that makes. It's a nice little pop of colour, isn't it? And then I'm not gonna rub that, I'm just gonna dab it to get rid of any loose chalk, like that. And then this one's upturned. You might not be able to see this on the camera, but I can tell you it is quite clear. My image is clear enough for me to see it and colour it in. So when you're doing this at home, you'll see that. Right, now at the end, have a look. I think I'm just going to go back here, because this wing is folded slightly. So I'm just going to go back there and put a little bit of a dark line where the wing changes over, and just blend that down again, like that. And I'm going to get my normal green and just bring the normal green down, the moss green colour. Just go over it a little bit, so it's a little bit clearer. I want you to be able to see this on the camera. So in real life it looks okay, but I just want to make sure that you get the gist of what I'm doing. Okay, and then I'm just going to dab that, and then we'll add a bit more brown to the second duck's body, being careful not to obscure his foot there. That's it. And then again, just dab off any excess ink. Okay, now you can see you might get little bits of powder there. Don't worry too much about that. What you can do is just blow the dust off, and then just go over that, which I'll do actually, because I can show you. So you can see there's a tiny little bit of a smudge there. I mean, I wouldn't worry about this if I wasn't doing this video, but just to show you, and just get your colour and just blend it away with the orange we were using, or the yellow for the background. But to be honest, I think that the way it fades off, it looks quite nice. Okay, so that was the chalk pencils. Now we're going to do the bunting, and I'm going to do the bunting with gel pens. And you can see I've got different varieties here. You can use any gel pens. Now, the only thing I would say about these, I'm going to start with the blue one. The only thing I would say about these is that don't go over and over your image, because they tend to scratch at the paper. And what you find is if you keep going over and over, it can actually damage the card, and you can get a little sort of hole in it. So try to work out what colours you're going to do, and then just try and do it in one hit. So to do that, run off your pen onto a bit of scrap paper, and then you're good to go like that. You can see I'm alternating these, but you know, you don't have to do that. You can have one or two colours. You can do it all in the same colour if you've only got one gel pen. And if you haven't got gel pens, the reason I'm showing you these techniques is to show you all the different ways I colour images. So this one's a red colour, so I'm just running that off. And I think I'm actually going to miss that one out because I don't want red and orange next to each other. So there. And then we're going to do that last one there. Now, the lovely thing about gel pens, I was umming whether to use them for the bunting or the balloons, because they have a lovely sort of glaze finish when they dry. So they're ideal for balloons. But the trouble is, like, these are quite small balloons. But if you're doing quite a big balloon, that's what I'm saying to you. You have to be careful, because if you go over and over, it can lift up the scratch the cardstock. And then we just do that a little bit there. And then what I do is take just a fine liner. This one is 0.3, but it doesn't really matter, not as long as it's not really over 0.5, because then they get quite thick. And then we just follow that line. I'm just going to run that off, run that line up there. I'm never very good at this. I sometimes end up getting double lines. I don't know why. But, you know, it doesn't really matter, like that. And then while I've got the fine liner, I'm going to do exactly the same here. So I'm going to just follow those lines up, like that, for the string of the balloons. And then the little tangle where they all meet, and tied to his leg, and then we just tuck that underneath. Now, the third technique I'm going to use for the balloons is using the inks as paints. So I'm going to bring my scrap paper in. I've got just usually I would do this on my craft mat, but I'm bringing this in so you can see it. It's just a stamping block, and I'm going to use bosenberry Versacolor. I'm just going to squodge a little bit on there. I'm going to use scarlet Versacolour, squodge that on there. And let's see what other colour. I think we'll have the blue. So this is the royal blue that I used for the sky. Oh, maybe not then. Maybe I'll use the yellow. I think I'll use the yellow. So that's marigold. So let's squodge a bit of that. Now you need to have inks that will give you some, you know, not really dry ink pads. The reason the raw blue's dry, I like it dry for the sky, because otherwise you get big patches of blue. So, but you need ink pads that are fairly new. Now what you do now, I've got some water here. I'm just going to dip my brush in the water, and then I'm going to take some kitchen roll and just dab that off, because we just want it damp. We don't want to watercolour our card really, because it isn't watercolour cardstock. This card is 300 GSM, so it is quite hardy, but we don't want to put too much water on it. And then can you see what I'm doing? I'm using a very fine paintbrush, just going around the image. And then as you need more ink, pick that up. So basically you're using the inks to paint. And when I first started colouring the images, I think this was the one I used most of all. But now I use all three. I tend to use the gel pens for small areas, and I tend to use the pencils. You know, when I do the figures, if you've seen the reflection ones with the figures in the last stamp issue, they were done with the pencils. So, you know, and I'm sure you have other art equipment you can use, or other craft equipment. When you finish that, give it a good rinse, because obviously we want to do a different colour now. wipe it off on your piece of kitchen roll, and then we're going to have the purple. So again, exactly the same. Just pick it up on your brush. Now, the only thing is, when you're doing large areas, because we're not using hardly any water, it's quite difficult to do really large areas with this technique unless you're using watercolour card, because the card won't like the water content and may buckle a little bit. So this technique is good for, and of course the other thing you can do is just using coloured ink on your image before you stamp it. You know, that's the other way to use colour. But if you're using fine detail, sometimes, I mean, you could definitely do that with these balloons. You could, in fact, I probably would have done that. I just wanted to show you different techniques. Okay, and then the last colour is the canary yellow. And the other thing is, when you're not using too much water, you don't tend to pink up so much ink, so you have to keep going back. That's why it's good to have it either splodged onto a stamp block or onto your craft mat, which or glass mat, you know, whatever you use when you're making cards, something that you can wipe off, because you don't want to put it on paper or anything porous, because you won't be able to pick it back up off that. It's sort of, you're using it a bit like an artist palette. Okay, so I think that gives you the idea of that technique. And then when that's dry, we'll go and put some little lines, some little white marker pen lines on there, just to show the light bouncing off. So now what I've got to do is go in with my textures set, and the first one I'm going to use is the small grass out the textures set. Now, I have to say, I use this every day in the crafting, and if your budget's very limited, I would say the texture set is a must. I would, you know, out of all my cardio stamps, I use this one all the time, and I wouldn't be without it. So it's a very good investment. And, you know, I know, you know, we all have to consider our purchases now. So that's my advice anyway. Okay, and I'm just going to use this because I don't want really the bottom of the stamp. So I'm just going to put these in randomly, in random places. And where I did the lines before, do you remember me saying to you, I'm just going to put some of these in here, and then under the duck's feet, like that, and then here, and then we can probably use the whole of that now. Put some more in the bottom here, and I've shown you this before, but you can make the grass longer by just starting off halfway through the grass, and it you know, you can, if you're worried about seeing a bit of a line, which you don't really, but if you're worried about that, then just brush it off with your finger, and you see, you just get taller grass. It's you know, it's very versatile, this stamp. Okay, so I'm just now going to put some more in, very randomly, more in there, more in the middle, and the side. And then I'm going to put some at the back, a bit there. And then don't forget the edges of the card, because, you know, your picture has an edge, but the scene doesn't just end where your card ends. So you want the to give the illusion that it goes on and on. I think that's all, because we might just put a tiny bit there. I want to leave that sort of blurred bit in the background. Now I'm going to go back to my pencils, and I'm going to take the brown, and I'm just going to run it around the first paw image and through the middle, and I'm going to do the same here, like that. And I'm just going to run a tiny little bit under there and there, like that. And then I'm going to take my dry baby wipe and just blend that through so it looks like the mud. And then I'm going to use it the same on some of these sections of grass. Like that. That's it. Now, I'll probably go back and put some more grass in, but I want to use my wavy grass now, which is from the stamps that I showed you. And this was, the idea is that it's blowing in the wind. But what you can do, so, you know, it's great for that. But the other thing you can do, and I'm going to use the evergreen, the darker green. I'm going to give it a really good inking because I want it to stand out. If you don't want it blowing in one direction, see if I stamp that like that, it would all be going that way. All you do is put your piece of paper there and then turn the grass that way. And you see, and then it sticks upright. So it's entirely up to you. I say, these are very versatile, these stamps. And then I'm going to add some of these in different places. That one I'm going to have wavy. And I'm going to have another one down here, sort of halfway. And then I'm going to have one over here near this duck, which I think we're going to use quite a lot of, like that. So I say, as you decide, you know, it's your picture. So you decide where you think these would look best. We just have a little bit sticking out there. And as I said to you before, I like to put a little bit coming out of the picture like that. Just, well, not that much out of the picture. You can't really see it. So let's do that a little bit more like that. So it doesn't look like, you know, there's a little bit of continuity. And what I'm going to, because this is facing one way, I'm just going to add a little bit there, and then I'm going to turn it up. So we've got that, we've got those blowing that way, but we've also got, make it look a bit tangly. Can you see what I'm doing? So I've got, all I'm doing is twisting that round to make it look a little bit different. And that's, I think that's probably enough. So we just put a little bit more in there. And then with the evergreen, I'm going to go back to my smaller grass stamp set. I'm going to ink it quite hard, and then I'm going to go in more around where the pools are. Like that. Okay. Just going to put the lid on that. And then with my green pencil, the same green I used for the ducks, I'm just going to blend away some of the brightness, as exactly the same as I did with the brown, just to make them look a bit more natural, a bit more blended into the landscape. And then I'm going to use a little bit of the brown underneath that. And over the top. Go back over that one a little bit. I'm going to put all the colour in first, and this one, because there's a line there, look, I'm just going to, and then just blend that all in. Like that. Right, so now I've almost finished this picture, I'm just going to go in and tweak it a little bit. So I'm just going to add a little bit more green here along that line there, and just under there, just to blur that a little bit more than it was originally. Like that, that's better. And then I'm just going to run a little bit of the inked green. So I'm using the Versacraft pine into these areas. And then I'm going to cut a little bit of the paper that I've been using. I'm just going to cut it at a sort of wavy angle. I don't know if you can see what I'm doing here, but this is a technique we use for snow and all sorts. And what this does, it just gives a little bit of texture, of contour to if you're doing groundwork, you know, either in snow, or I use this technique a lot, and I nearly always do it after I've done all the stamping, because you can tailor it to where you've stamped the images in your picture. And then you see, like I'm doing this wavy grass here, I'm putting this the cut paper underneath it, but there is still a little bit of a line there. So what I'm just going to do is just go back in with my brown chalk pencil just to blur that a little bit, and then blend it in. See, the lovely thing about these pencils, you don't get that harsh line, and then that just looks like it's sitting in, you know, it would be crowned mud, wouldn't it, and grass. So, and then we're going to just go back under the duck's feet again. You know, we may have to just recolour their feet, and then I want it either side. So although I don't want it on his foot, I want it either side of the foot, and you can't really see that, so I'm just going to do that again. Like that, that's it. And then this one, so we're going up over his feet but not touching the feet, so can you see either side? And that side. And there. And then I'm just going to blend that into the background. Okay, and then I'm just going to do this around, a little bit around the water as well. Like that. Now you can see, look, now you get these sort of natural contours of the land. And because what happens is, because you're putting the cut paper like that, and then you're inking over, even though it's the same colour, it's a double layer. So when you take it away, you've got the paler side this side and the darker side that side. And it's a great technique to use for lots of different things. And it's easy, isn't it? You know, it's not difficult to do. Okay, these look a bit like they're in the air. So I'm just going to go back and ground them a little bit. And I'm also going to add a little bit of pencil mark in here. So I think when you're doing animals, you always have to ground them properly, because otherwise they do tend to look like they're floating. Okay, I think that's fine. So we know what I'm going to do is I'm going to go back. This is a 0.1 fine liner, which is the finest. And then I'm just going to run a line there. So it's obvious he is standing on the ground. And I'm going to do the same here as well. And if you can see, I'm just making it a little bit jaggy to look like the ground's a bit uneven. And then you can do the same with your grasses. Don't make it a straight line, do it in a sort of wavy line, as if it's round where these would grow. Okay, I think we're nearly there. And then I'm just going to add some lines around our water. Like that. I'm going to add some more grass over the water, and then I'm going to add some white in, and then we'll look at it and see if we need to do anything more, but I think we're almost finished. So I'm going to use again the darker green, and I'm going to go. Now if you find that, because we're stamping over Versafine, so if you're finding your dark green isn't really showing and that your water is just sort of sticking out like a sore thumb, use a Versafine green, which will stamp right over that. I'm not going to do that here. I think you get the idea. But if I was, I can't remember in the original, I think I just used Versacolor. But yeah, if you're having trouble with it showing, then use the Versafine. That will be permanent over the top of it, and it's a stronger ink. So, okay. So I think, as I always do, when I've finished a card, I like to just step back a bit, have a look. I'm going to add a little bit more of the royal blue colour to the sky, because I just want it to be a little bit more prominent. And that's what I mean about a drier ink pad. You see, you can go straight from the ink pad to the card. You wouldn't be able to do that if this was new. You'd get horrible sort of dark blue splodges and it wouldn't look right. So I like to keep my pads for that reason, you know, older, drier pads. And then I'm going to just touch up both the feet, because obviously they're quite an important part of this picture, because that's what the balloons and the bunting is tied to, and the beaks go over the beaks. And what you can do is you can go around that. I'm not going to do it today because of time, but you can go around the bird image in with a black fine liner, or the bunting, or the balloons, but you know, that's entirely up to you. And then the only other thing I've got to do is add some white, which are these brilliant Signo pens. You can use any white gel pen for this, and then we're just going to add a little bit of a highlight on the balloons there, and then we're going to add a little bit of a highlight. Just make sure you run these off, and I've shown you before, they can get a bit cloggy at the end sometimes. If that happens, just take a clean dry baby wipe that little, and then we're just going to add some highlights into the water like this. Wendy's already given you the gaps, so you don't have to work it out. Then what I would suggest is you just gently blend that in a little bit while it's wet, just so it is a highlight and it's not, you know, it's not showing too much. And then I like to put a little bit of white highlight in the grass, especially around areas where it's quite dark, so you can actually see where we've stamped. And a little bit at the back there, just rub that in, and one here. Now obviously I'm using this on wet ink. This happens to me when I make these videos, so the pens, you know, it's a little bit tough to get the pens to work, but you won't have that trouble because you'll let yours just dry off a little bit. And they don't take long to dry. It's just that I'm, you know, rushing because I want you to see the end version. Okay, so I think that's given you an idea of the techniques I use. I use the pencil on the birds, we use the gel pens on the bunting, and we use the inks done like a paint palette onto the balloons. And then what I like to do is, because this is why I like to put these tapes here, because it gives you a nice frame for the card. If you make a bit of a mess, it will go onto the tape rather than onto the card. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to make a little black line either side. I'm just going to move that out of the way so I've got room to put the ruler. So I'm going to put that there. And I'm going to use my 03 pen fine liner, but really it doesn't, I don't like these lines too thick, in case I make a mistake and have to go over it again. See, it just gives it that nice edge. And now you can see why I wanted the blue to go buff right up to the tape, because it shows me where to put the line. Because if you don't, when you take that tape off, you don't know where the line is should be. Okay, so that's the finished card. This was the original, or a picture of the original, so it's larger. Obviously the original card was the same size as this one, and I hope that's given you some idea of the techniques I use. I love seeing the versions you make, and I love seeing, even if you're not doing this particular card, I love seeing all your cards, and you know, the tips and hints that you give to other people on the Facebook page. So if you're not on it, it's Cardio Crafts. Please come and join us. It's a lovely environment. Thank you very much for watching, and I hope to have you along the next time.